This is the third and the last part of the video. Now we are going to summarize the main points of our previous presentations in the first two parts. So as we have understood here that you see that different categories have different morphological and syntactic properties of a word to determine its categorization. So word has different morphological and syntactic criteria. By identifying these criteria, we can classify, we can set a word into a particular or into a certain type of category. There is an important point here that you have to notice. The morphological properties of a given word provide only an initial and rough guide. So we cannot depend entirely on the morphological criterion or properties of a word because of the irregularities and the complications that we have studied regarding the inflectional criterion. So we have to support our analysis or our categorization by going to the syntactic one. Usually, as we have seen, and as everybody knows in morphology, in order to identify the morphological features of a certain word or a certain category, we have to depend on inflection and derivation. As in this example, for instance, a word like happy, because it can be inflected into the comparative degree, happier, and the superlative degree, happiest, it should be classified as an adjective because only adjectives, and by the way, some adverbs can be inflected for the comparative and the superlative degree. Then if we talk about derivation, we can identify the category of a certain word from the derivational suffix with which it ends. For example, a word like happiness. Happiness simply is a noun because it ends with the suffix ness. Only nouns end with this derivational suffix. We can take other examples. Careful is an adjective because it permits or licenses the derivational suffix ful. The same thing for ous, as in famous. We can simply say that the word famous is an adjective because it ends with the derivational suffix us, and the same thing for all derivational. That is to say, altogether, depending on the inflection and derivation, we can decide the category of the word. However, because of the problem, as we have said, we cannot depend mainly on the inflection. Inflection here we have irregularity, we have some problems, and for the derivation we have the limited productivity of derivation because, as you know, that derivational suffixes usually are not rule bound or rules governed. Usually, we just add these haphazardly and randomly without any rule. Then we can conclude now that we can not only entirely depend on the morphological clues due to the problems that you have referred to, and that is the morphological evidence is suggestive rather than conclusive, and it has to be checked against syntactic evidence. Now, finally, I would like to refer to the last pages of this chapter in Radford. The chapter concludes the chapter by referring to some syntactic properties or the distribution of some categories in English. For instance, if you go to page, by the way, here you can just go and read all these distributions and positions of different grammatical categories from page 37 up to page 35. So in these pages we can learn the syntactic differences or the distributional differences, for example, between content words and function words. Content words, by content words here we refer to lexical words, and function words usually we refer to grammatical words. And also you can read or you can study the differences, the syntactic distributions of determiners and adjectives. Determiners usually occur in certain positions, in limited positions, whereas adjectives also occur in other specific positions. So, according to this limitation of the positions where determiners and adjectives occur or full, we can decide whether a word is a determiner or an adjective. And then you can differentiate between main verbs and auxiliaries. Main verbs occur in certain places, they fill certain slots within a phrase or a sentence. The same thing for auxiliaries. So depending on these slots, on these positions, on these distributional differences, once again we can decide the differences between a main verb and an auxiliary. And later we talk about the infinitive to and prepositional to. Infinitive to, infinitival to. Usually infinitive to or infinitive to is followed by an infinitive, whereas a prepositional to is followed by a complement, which is a noun or a noun of phrase. Finally, you can read about some distributional differences between prepositions versus complementizers, like for example. For can be used in English as a preposition and as a complementizer, or as a function word, or as a conjunction. So when it is used as a preposition, it should be followed by a complement, should be followed by an object. But however, when it is used as a complementizer, it should be followed by a clause. This is the last point that I wanted to talk about grammatical categories. So at the time being, I am going to summarize once again the main points that we have already explained in this chapter. The chapter is entitled Grammatical Category, and we have already defined what is meant by category. So any set of expressions that share the same or a number of morphological and syntactic features usually belong to the same category. As we have said, when we talk about category, we talk about structure dependence principle, and we have already illustrated the main points of this principle. In order to have a principal description or an adequate description of the categories of all words and phrases, or grammatical categories, or even classes in any language, we have to do a comprehensive analysis, which is the morphosyntactic. So by merging both morphology and syntax, by depending on the inflectional and derivational criteria plus the syntactic. Here, by the way, I want to remind you once again that by syntactic criterion we refer to the distributional criterion, and where a word or a phrase occurs. As we have explained, that morphology or the morphological criterion could not be used as a conclusive. It is rather a rough evidence that might help to identify the categorization or the grammatical status of the word. We should support our analysis with the syntactic criterion. Thank you very much for your listening, and as I told you, this is the third and the last part of the video.